Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, Law Firms with and Without Cyber Insurance, the latest target for hackers. My name's Court Pereira, and I'm the Marketing Manager at Cyvatar. We are thrilled to have you join us for what promises to be an enlightening and engaging discussion on this timely and critical topic. Today's webinar aims to shed light on the increasing cyber threats facing law firms and the pivotal role of cyber insurance in this landscape.
Thank you, Court. Appreciate it. We're gonna have some fun today. So we're gonna shake it up. We've done a few prep sessions with Mark and Carlos, and we just give each other the whole time. So it's gonna be an interesting conversation as we flow through it. So we're just gonna start out with you, Mark, and then we're gonna circle back to Carlos. Why are law firms even a target? Do hackers care about them?
So it's kind of interesting because it was like, why do people rob banks? They rob banks because that's where the money is. The reason they attack law firms is twofold. Number one, that's where the secrets are. That's where the good stuff is. When you think about when you go and consult with a law firm, it's because there's something interesting, dynamic, sensitive that you need to share. That's why lawyers have attorney-client privilege. The attackers have learned two things about law firms. Number one, if they want to get sensitive medical information, sensitive legal information, sensitive merger or acquisition information, go for the law firm. The second thing is that law firms are very time sensitive as well. So they become victims then of attacks based upon the time sensitive nature of information, which are going to be ransomware attacks, denial of service attacks. And that's why law firms are increasingly being the victims of both of those kind of attacks.
Carlos, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, and that's all absolutely true. But I will add also that when it comes to smaller firms, let's say, under 100 attorneys or whatnot, they are likely to be, number one, understaffed on the IT side, and they wouldn't necessarily have any sort of security staff in place. And then when we launched LegalSec back in 2012, that year I borrowed the RSA conference keynote speaker motto and applied it to LegalSec because it was relevant. And that was, an attack on us is an attack on all of us. Why is that? Most law firms have the same controls. So it is up to the firm to stay on top of them and improve them and operate them well. So the bad guys know, if I know how to get to this firm, I probably can figure out to get to another one. And the chain is, infinite. So.
Hey, that's scary, but you touched on something. Wait, law firms don't have CISOs and security teams? What's going on here? How do they secure themselves?
So mostly law firms have an IT person or maybe an IT staff. All right. And that has to do with the nature of, they're in an information business. Okay. So information is their product. Legal advice and stuff is their product, but it's information. Now, the larger law firms, the firms that have, 100 lawyers, 200 lawyers, 500 lawyers, 5,000 lawyers, they operate more like a company, a corporation. And they're going to have a CISO and an incident response team and all that. But smaller law firms typically have just an IT staff where security is part of the portfolio for the IT people. The other problem with the way law firms are organized is they're typically organized as partnerships. Sometimes as an LLP, but oftentimes as a partnership. And as such, any dollars that are spent on security are coming out of the profits and shared resources of the individual partners. And so a dynamic there about spending money on stuff that is not necessarily perceived as protecting the bottom line. Now, when you're selling security to a corporation, you say, the following regulations require you to do the following things. When you're going to a law firm, one of the interesting things is like a drop-down menu. You say, well, what industry are you in? Are you in technology? Well, no. Are you in transportation? No. Are you in healthcare? No. And the answer is, of course, to a law firm is they're in every industry. They're in whatever industry their clients are in. And they need to realize that.
Real quick, I would say that the cost for having security dedicated staff in a law firm is about 400 attorneys. In my experience, that's what I see out there. Maybe 300 to 400 but anything below like 100, they don't have security for anything below 200 really dedicated. They may not even have an IT director for that matter. So it is important to help them understand what risks are in technology, especially those who are managing the IT, so the IT spectrum as a whole, but also a lot of these firms, whether they're small or big, they also rely heavily on managed service security providers today, and that's an option for everybody that should be considered as well. But that is from an operational point of view, and there needs to be a separation from the strategic, the governance point of view that we'll touch on later too.
One model is sort of the closed enclave. We keep everything in-house. And the other model is nothing is in-house, everything is in the cloud, and everything is outsourced. And then you have sort of variations on that theme. And each one of them has an advantage and disadvantage. But what you don't have is you don't have sort of an organized way of assessing the advantages and disadvantages from a security and privacy perspective.
So wait a second, this sounds like a recipe for disaster, right? So Carlos, I know you actually secure law firms, and let me frame up what you just said and what I heard is, so they have, some of them have MSPs, which are IT folks, and they also are trying to do the security piece. Sometimes they may not have the expertise. I know you're VCSOs to some of the law firms like under 300 or so, but there are hundreds of them. They're smaller law firms, and they have an IT person, but they don't have someone implementing security controls and making sure they're secure, and they don't have the governance. And if I'm a hacker, I'm gonna try to hack into a lawyer because of the dependency, Mark, you said earlier, is everything is time sensitive, right? They need to go litigate cases. They have to have certain data available to them. So how are they solving this today? I'm confused.
Yeah, so I'll give you a practical example of how this is an issue. I have a client who a lot of firms, 50 attorneys and up, they have a lot of controls, but they don't understand what the controls are doing, how they are operating, how they work together, or none of that. So in this particular example, I have a client with, under 100 attorneys. They had a MSP doing the SIEM, like a managed security service monitoring the environment, and they had an EDR in place, which was Microsoft, which requires a lot of work. And so they thought that if the MSP saw the alert, the MSSP saw the alert, they will take care of it. That is not the case. And that's something we're going to touch on it later too. But the MSSP in this particular case, all they did was toss an alert over. They didn't, and that was it. That was all they are doing. Yeah. So the IT director thought, okay, they will take care of it, and it didn't, and it led to something. It led to an issue. So you need to understand what the controls are, what they are doing, and how they operate.
To go off on that, law firms do take privacy and security seriously. They care very much about it. It's not like they're not doing anything. What they don't have is comprehensive end-to-end, point-to-point security programs with documented and tested protocols. Because a lot of it is they do what is called SEP, someone else's problem. They outsource it to like an MSSP and say, oh yes, these people are taking care of it. But if you ask the MSSP, they say, wait, no, that's not what we're doing. We're just doing alerting. We're not fixing stuff. So you have gaps. This is true of any organization. I think it's particularly true of law firms.
Yeah, you hit on something, Carlos, and we're gonna have a whole session on this. I'm just gonna coin this phrase. It's called alert tossing. Okay, because if you're tossing an alert, but there is no one to catch it on the other end, it's just gonna fall on the ground and somebody's gonna get compromised. And that's definitely what's happening with a lot of the MSPs and MSSPs. And so really the goal should be is to not have the alert to begin with. Like, you need to be blocking and preventing it. So if you're a small business, you don't have anybody to catch that alert and triage it and respond to it. So I think that's definitely broken. But let me go back to some of the points we talked about earlier. You mentioned something, Mark. So law firms, they work together on some cases, but they're adversarial on other cases. Then they all get together and share data all in the cloud sometimes. How the hell does that work?
So
And
that's
then
an
they
interesting.
go for a drink together.
Then they
Yeah,
go
that,
work
they
together.
do, and that points at another problem. One problem is the problem of the cloud. Okay, so a lot of these people say, "Well, we are using the cloud. We have secure cloud." There's no such thing as secure cloud. There's cloud security,
Yeah.
but there's no secure cloud. So they've been told by others that there is a secure cloud, and there just simply isn't. So the second problem is this collaborative problem. So law firms typically will work together as joint defendants in a case, joint plaintiffs in a case, and they have e-discovery and they have thousands of documents set up in a cloud server. So law firm A, B, and C may be working together on one case, but they may be adversaries in another case. One of the problems is you have multiple stakeholders who all of whom have to authenticate to a document review station or a document review thing at one point, but then not be allowed to get other places within an enterprise. It's uncommon, for example, for Chrysler to have Ford logging into their systems, but it is not uncommon in a law firm to have something similar to that.
Wow. I mean, that's got like Carlos, how would you secure a scenario like that where you got to have a multi-factor authentication and access to the data logging and monitoring of who accesses and downloads all this data, but you had to open it up to potentially an adversarial law firm because you're working a case together. How do you secure that?
You have to have visibility to begin with. And we've been discussing a lot of we've mentioned a few technical controls. We've mentioned that here, but the security is mostly, in my opinion, a process issue. Is we all know it, we hear it. It's a process, technology, and people issue, right? I think process is very important, and for that you have to engage management. You have to make it a point to have good processes. But in this particular case, to your question, is visibility is very important. Having that MSSP is important. That is
We talk about
monitoring.
zero trust models as well.
Right. And
one of
then
the problems we have is each enterprise is responsible for authenticating its own users. And we rely on that authentication to allow them to have access control. If that authentication is weak or improper or spoofed, whoever it is who's is in for all purposes to all these enterprises. And that's frightening.
Right, and that goes into the zero trust model, goes into the visibility that you receive, but also enforcing policies from different systems that you may already have in place and bringing them together. You mentioned, Mark, they don't have a security program as a whole. They have EDR or antivirus. They have a firewall. They have a MFA, but they don't have something that can be seen as an architecture that works together. And that's what zero trust, if done properly, can give you. It can give you that central point of policy enforcement or policy management, then to go to the enforcement piece.
They have lots of really good point solutions.
Yeah.
What they don't have is an enterprise.
They don't have a strategy around it. Carlos, do me a favor. I was on the panel just last week and it was on zero trust. And I finished it with, we're never going to use the word zero trust because if I went to a partner, a law firm, and said, we're going to implement a zero trust model, it's like, what are you talking about? So can you explain what zero trust means in this context, just so we...
Yes. And that's a good point, because I had that conversation with two different clients who are in the journey, we're now in the journey, and it's basically providing transparent and consistent user experience. That's how I explain it to the attorneys, to the business leaders, is making sure you can do what you need to do. You can practice law. That's my focus always. How do I enable you to practice law securely? Well, I'm going to do that by providing a platform where I secure your practice in a consistent way so you can access your document management system from anywhere you are. You can do your billing reports from anywhere you are in a secure way. That's what zero trust means to a law firm, in my opinion.
Yeah, and when you think about what a lawyer, I think what Carlos pointed out, when you think about what a lawyer needs to do, the first thing they need to do is they need to get access to email and the like. Okay, well, that's a common problem. We've solved that problem mostly. Then they need to be able to get to their documents, and as Carlos said, anywhere that they are. Well, we have document management systems, but they're not their documents. They need to get to their documents, typically on a shared drive, because other lawyers may want to be able to see those as well. Some of the documents are only theirs, and some of the documents are shared. Then you have documents that are shared with others outside the enterprise, maybe with a client, maybe with an opposing counsel. Then you have document management systems for e-discovery and the like, and those are shared by others to us. Then we need to get to legal research, which is completely open, but where we want to maintain privacy of the things that we're asking, like LexisNexis and the like. And then we need to get to our forms. So each of these have different controls. And then we need to get to our billing system, which is both public and open and confidential and closed. So it has both characteristics. We need to move from enterprise from application to application to application to application in an environment where we could be at home, in the office, on an airplane, at a client site. And we need to do that all very dynamically, quickly, and as Carlos pointed out, completely seamlessly.
Sounds like you need a strategy around that to actually implement it. But here's the deal, right? So it's not a problem. We know that there's an alert tossing happening, but law firms, they have insurance, right? Cyber insurance, and they have liability insurance in case something happens. So they're covered, right? Talk to me, Mark.
Yeah. First of all, one thing about all cyber insurance policies is you have wonderful coverage provided you never file a claim. All right. That's the first thing. So one of the interesting things about cyber insurance, both in medicine and in law, is that in medicine and law, the professionals, lawyers and doctors, have an ethical obligation to preserve the secrets of their clients. So one of the problems is if there is a data breach and a breach of that ethical obligation, is this a professional liability claim against their legal malpractice carrier? Or is this a cyber insurance claim against their cyber carrier? And of course, each one of them are going to do this, and they're going to point to the other and say, well, they have to pay and we have to pay. The time to figure that out is before you have a claim. The second problem is that I'll give you a common example of a problem that happens in law firms. Law firms are often responsible for dispensing funds on behalf of clients. Mm-hmm. And therefore, they're being targeted for what are called BEC or business email compromise frauds. So a law firm gets an email from a client saying, please distribute $1,250,000 on my behalf to this person at this bank account, blah, blah, blah. And they go ahead and do it. Well, it turns out the email is a fraud. And the question is, who has liability there? What should they have done to validate this? And this is common in the real estate industry because there's large amounts of money going back and forth. And the law firm may have the right bank, the right name, the right account, but the wrong routing number. So the hackers will come in and maybe they've attacked the sender, maybe they attacked the recipient, whatever. Or somebody will hack the law firm and send an email from the law firm saying, here's the transfer information with the routing information, and somebody else will rely on it. So you want to make sure that you have comprehensive coverage for every form of fraud that might occur.
So using that scenario, is it malpractice if a law firm exposes data in a breach?
It clearly is malpractice, and the ethical rules for lawyers impose an ethical obligation to protect client confidences and to protect clients against fraud.
Okay, so law firms can get sued. So tell me about what happened with Orrick, and then you can dive into Pandora Papers, both of them at the same time. Talk to me, what happened here with these hacks?
Not only can law firms get sued, but law firms that specialize in data breaches can get sued.
Yes.
Nobody is immune from a data breach. And, you know, that's why the good Lord in his infinite wisdom invented insurance. Okay. But again, you have great insurance until you file a claim. And let me give you an example. You have ransomware insurance. It covers you if any of the data that you have is damaged or destroyed. Mm-hmm. Ransomware doesn't damage or destroy data. It simply makes it inaccessible. So you file a claim saying, aha, I can't get to the data. They say, well, it says damaged or destroyed. Sorry, you don't get paid. So you need to make sure that your insurance policies cover the kinds of claims you're likely to have. And you want to do that long before you have to file a claim.
And I'm going to add to that that one of the risks that I see as a fractional CISO or consultant for law firms is that, generally speaking, and this is true for many other industries, the general counsel owns the cyber insurance policy, as it should. That doesn't mean that you, if you are a CIO and you're in this room, or an IT director or an IT manager, shouldn't have access to that policy and understand it. You need to. It's not like, oh, it's the GC responsibility. It is your responsibility to, if you are responsible for responding to incidents from a security point of view, from an IT point of view, make sure that you have that understanding. It's very important.
You just pointed out something very interesting. Most law firms don't have a general counsel.
Yeah, the smaller ones. Agree?
That's the
They have a
problem.
managing partner. But they say, well, why do we need a general counsel? We're all lawyers here.
Right.
Well, we're not all the same kinds of lawyers.
Number
And we're
one.
not all the kinds of lawyers who are responsible for evaluating the risk to our own enterprise.
Both of you guys touched on this, is that what people don't realize when you get a cybersecurity insurance policy, as I talk to a lot of my customers, I ask, hey, what's your policy look like? The security person or IT person usually says, I don't know. Let me go talk to the CFO or someone else in the organization. But every time you fill out, the underwriting form for those policies, they're asking you technical questions. And so if the security or IT person doesn't even know what they've signed up for instance, if it says you have to have multi-factor in place, you got to, apply security patches, you got to have endpoint protection and blocking ransomware malware. And if someone else checked those boxes and the security person doesn't know it, then you have an incident and those things were not being enforced. Guess what? You don't get paid. You've been paying out from this insurance policy, and they're going to come back and like, well, you said you were doing these things, and clearly you're not, because multi-factor was bypassed. They got access into your email, and you transferred money or whatever the incident was. So that is systemic, and there's a lot of companies that have a misunderstanding of their cybersecurity insurance policy because they're not communicating internally.
My favorite question on a policy is, do you have a comprehensive information security program designed to prevent data breaches and to protect the confidentiality, availability, and integrity of information? Yes or no? That is not a yes or no question. It has never been a yes or no question, but I know that if I want to get insurance, I have to say yes. So the person applying for the insurance says yes, then you have a breach and you file a claim and they say, wait a second, you didn't have a comprehensive program. How do we know this? Because you had a breach.
But see, what people don't realize, I work a lot with insurance companies. The underwriters that are writing these questionnaires are typically not security people. Yesterday, I was literally answering a security questionnaire with one of our customers, and it says, do you have information technology security in place? And
here's a classic example. Do you have a comprehensive insurance program to protect the confidentiality of documents in rest? Yes. What are you doing? Well, we use Office 365. What does that mean? It doesn't. It means everything and it means nothing.
Yes.
And the point is, Office 365 can be reasonably secure, but it is not a security program.
I deal with that every day as a fractional CISO. Not every day, but at the beginning of each engagement, or when we are responding to client audits or cyber insurance questionnaires, because they have many of the controls, but there is no program.
Right.
And you mentioned something, Corey, very important. You mentioned, yes, people don't know the policies in place. And that is so true. That is one of the biggest issues in law firms, I think. Biggest risk is that IT may have this collection of policies that they've developed throughout a period of time, many years or whatnot. But people in the law firm, partners, associates, and staff, they don't know that those policies exist. And they have them, but they don't communicate them. So how are you supposed to comply with them? So
maybe the first thing I would do as a law firm is take those insurance policies and have somebody who specializes in insurance and coverage look it over. Another law firm, maybe. The second thing is to have a really good relationship with if you're not going to have a CISO, have a fractional CISO, but a really good relationship with a digital forensics and incident response entity that you can trust, and have that relationship long before you have an incident.
Yes, and I want to mention a caveat to that though, Mark. There is you have to understand your policy again. Why? Because if you and I run into this, I work with a lot of insurance companies too, and help people understand their policy. But there may be a dismissal of your claim if you bring a instant response team that is not part of their panel.
That's right.
So you first want to go to their panel, start there. Well, what they call their panel is their preferred vendors. You get discounts on top of that if you go with them. So start there. Do have that team in place. Absolutely agree with Mark, but try to make it such that is integrated or approved by your insurer.
Right. So one of the problems you have with DFIR, which is digital forensics and instant response, is that your insurance carrier will have a people that's approved on the panel, and those are basically a commodity. Okay, and they get paid, and they do instant response as a commodity. You also want to have a very sophisticated instant response program as well. You want to have really deep dive people that you can use as well. All right, you want both.
So let me talk about that for a second. So what I've seen a lot of, because I've been on these insurance panels, these insurance companies, they actually have these panels for incident response. They don't have a panel for prevention to make sure that you have multi-factor in place, make sure you have endpoint protection in place, things are done properly. I think I know what we're going to see evolving is us moving to the other side, because the incidents already happened at that point.
Right.
It already cost everybody a lot of money. What if we can just stop it? Especially, we don't want this alert tossing situation happening. All right, we're gonna pick it real quick and get away from insurance. Let's dive into compliance. What I found, which is crazy, but running a business that secures SMBs, a few things. Just number one, I want to just lay down this gauntlet, but your IT person and your MSP, they are not your security person. There's two separate expertise there.
That's right.
I know a ton of IT people that are very skilled, love them, but I don't know what they do. They don't know what we do. You need both, and I think one of the expectations is that they can do both. Now let's tie back to compliance. So if I'm a law firm and your customers of the law firm, your clients of the law firm, they got to be HIPAA, they got to be CMMC, FedRAMP, ISO, all the compliance, SOC 2. You can't give that to an IT person, okay? You need a security person to do it. So there's a couple of points I want to make. One is you got to have the right person helping to implement those controls. But the second one, taking a big step back, are law firms required to be compliant if their customers, their clients have to be compliant?
Great question. So typically, one of the problems with compliance is that you'll go to a healthcare entity and they say, we want to be HIPAA compliant. And I asked, would you like to be HIPAA compliant or would you like to be secure? And they said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you can be secure and not compliant, but you can be compliant without being secure. Which do you want? They said, well, we want to be compliant because we have to check that checkbox. Yeah. Secure would be nice, but we have to be compliant. And so what compliance has done is it has set a ceiling rather than a floor. And that's unfortunate. Okay, that's the first problem with compliance. The second problem with compliance is if you go to any entity, a bank, an insurance company, blah, 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 whatever it is, the first thing the security people are going to say is, what is your regulation? That's where we're targeting. So they say, well, we can make you GLBA compliant. We can make you HIPAA compliant. We can make you FedRAMP compliant, blah, 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 blah. Which is all nice and well and good, but really the goal should be security. Now, for law firms, the problem is there's no regulation of a law firm. There's no regulation that says law firm must do this, this, and this. There are ethical rules on protecting client confidences and using appropriate technologies. But there's not like a standard I can look at and say, this is what I have to be compliant with. As a general rule, if a client gives a law firm regulated data, HIPAA data, GLBA data, financial records, we should expect, and it's not entirely clear that this is the case, we should expect that the law firm would secure the data up to the standard that the regulated entity regulates that entity. So like a hospital gives data to a law firm, that law firm should be a business associate and sign a BAA agreeing to protect the data. But it's not entirely clear that that's the case.
That's not the case. And so I wouldn't throw this to you, Carlos. So, and this is just from your perspective being a VC, so to a bunch of law firms. Lawyers don't have to be compliant, but their customers, their clients have to be. If they expose customer data, PII, EPHI, et cetera, then is it unethical that they're not held to any regulatory, compliance standards, and they can kind of just hide behind third-party risks and not even have to say they have to be secure? Is it unethical? Should lawyers be held to some type of standard?
It will be, yes, but Mark mentioned earlier, they do care. Law firms understand their ethical, commitments to their clients. So you have different things that you still need to comply with. One is clients, and this is one of the reasons LegalSec got started in 2012. Back then, we were started to see RFPs being sent to law firms asking security questions. I manage, depending on the size of the law firm, but I have to manage at least a dozen client audits per year, right? And that, again, depends on the size of the law firm. So there you have your first compliance commitment. You have to comply with your client's contract and expectations, which are steep, by the way. I mean,
and by the way, Carlos, this points out something else too. And Carlos and I were talking about this as well. You have 6 clients, 10 clients, each of which say you have to comply with our requirements. And the law firm is saying they're going, but they can contradict each other.
Right.
And that's another big problem for law firms too.
So from the CISO point of view, what I've been advising, and they are listening now to my clients, is let's settle on some standard that may satisfy a lot of these requirements. So usually I lead with NIST cybersecurity framework and the critical security controls by CIS. Why those? The CIS version 8, those are the critical controls that they are known for mitigating up to 80% of your risk, number one. So that's on the technical side. But I combine it with NIST CSF because what NIST CFS gives you is a business language, a business
That's right.
Approach that attorneys and business people will understand. So I put them together and build programs around those two. Now, the third piece here is we're seeing more and more law firms, larger, say 200 attorneys and up, the AM 250, maybe on the edge of the AM 250, to start looking at becoming or acquiring a SOC report, SOC 2 report, which then usually they will start with confidentiality, privacy, and security. Is something, it's not, but you said it, Mark, it is, you can be compliant but not secure and vice versa. Every company in the world that has been breached, I believe, is compliant with something, but they don't necessarily are secure. So it's either SOC 2 what we're seeing or ISO, and it depends on the size. ISO 27001 depends on the size of the company or the law firm. But
and
again,
this is basic common sense stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, it's like, duh, yes, this is what we should be doing. And I think Carlos pointed out, it's not the framework, it's the commitment to following the framework and having the resources to do it.
What are the standards we're going to have across all of our webinars here at Cyvatar is I hate talking about problems without offering solutions. So we're going to pivot to and finish off with a top 10 list here. We're going to talk about why this top 10 list is important. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions. So let's dive into, the top 10 recommendations to secure law firms. All right, let's go. Number 1. Implement and maintain two-factor or multi-factor authentication on everything, because You think about, old school, I'm old school. So you got, authentication, authorization, and accounting. So you gotta be able to say, okay, you're authenticated. You actually can log in. You are authorized to access this data, which means that if we got multiple lawyers from different firms, can you actually access this particular data? Are you authorized? And lastly, logging. Who actually logged in? When did they log in? What did they access? What did they download? You need to have that. And again, that's just table stakes. Most don't have it, is what I'm saying. Is that what you guys are saying?
From my point of view as a consultant and working with more than a dozen law firms, they usually will have it. I think it's now a commodity, but here's the thing. You mentioned conditions. You mentioned I have access to this, I have access to that. So the key now, the evolution of that two-factor authentication is applying what we call conditional access. If these conditions are met, then you can go here, you can go there, you're going to be multi-factor authenticated every time or just once, etc. So again, that goes into the zero trust conversation, but I think privilege access is another one that goes into the whole authentication deal. So
Passwords need to die a slow death, and you need to have the right multi-factor authentication.
Yes, and that's a whole nother conversation I wish we could talk about. MFA bypass, because people are like, hey, I had an MFA, but it got bypassed. No, you set it up wrong. But anyway, that's another conversation. Let's go to number 2. Vulnerability management programs. I'm just going to talk about this and then we'll get to the next one after. But so vulnerability management programs, just stats. I looked yesterday. There were 28,000 CVEs that came out, common vulnerabilities and exploits. So 28,000, basically that means every single day 77 come out. Okay. So saying I did patch Tuesday, I patch once a month is absolutely ridiculous. If you patch once a month and then the 77 come out every single day, you have a problem. Hackers exploit these vulnerabilities and get onto your systems. So you have to have this in place.
And you and I, we discussed this one point, Corey, but you are never going to be 100% patch. It's just not feasible.
Yeah.
Corey mentioned that a stupid number of vulnerabilities we deal with every day, but you have to be committed to get better every time. So that's all. And that's true for risk too. I have a client that wants to be 100% compliant with NIST CSF, and I'm like, it's not going to happen, buddy. It just
No, you can do it. You have to just unplug everything.
Or well, that or my answer was, do you have unlimited resources that you're going to give me all the money that I'm going to ask? And the answer is no.
Let's get going to the number 3. So implement and maintain next generation AV with 24/7 monitoring. And when you think about most SMBs, there's nuances to this. Now, there's SOCs out there, SOC security operations centers. They're gonna come and say, hey, we're gonna do 24/7 monitoring EDR. That's endpoint detection and response. What they're saying is they're gonna monitor. They're not actually gonna block ransomware malware. And then again, when they see something bad, they're gonna send you an alert. Okay, that's not gonna stop the attack. You actually have to configure your endpoint to block, and then also have someone to monitor. And that's what's usually missed, is one or the other. Number 4, security awareness programs. What I realized is a lot of these companies, especially law firms I've worked with, they don't have security awareness programs. They don't know, oh my God, if I'm not checking the actual URL of this link and seeing that it's valid, then I'm going to the wrong site and putting my credentials into the wrong site and getting my account compromised. They don't have that basic knowledge, and everyone needs to understand that.
As they say, the problem is not the silicon, it's the carbon.
Exactly. So you got to have this in place. Number 5, email phishing solution. So phishing, I think we all know this, but this is the number 1 threat vector, period, in the world. Everybody gets phishing emails. Lately, we're starting to see these fake DocuSign, fake Adobe Acrobat signing things, and they're not real. You click on that, then you end up getting compromised. This has to be prevented with email phishing solutions in place, the proper ones. Number 6, implement DNS browser security. Why is this important? So I've gotten to the point, and I think we all can agree, you're going to eventually click on a link. You're going to make a mistake, accidentally click on something. But when you click on something and it takes you to that newly created domain that is blacklisted, What if it was blocked? What if you could not, what if you had an extra layer when you click, it's not going to take you to abc123xyz.com. It is not going to allow you to go there. Okay, that's why this is important. You need to have the additional controls because email phishing solutions is not going to stop everything. Number 7, designated person responsible for cybersecurity. So this is one of the big gaps we talked about here. Law firms don't have it. Just because they don't even have general counsel and they don't have a security person inside their organization. You have to have someone with ownership and the responsibility and accountability for cybersecurity at your law firm. All right, get cybersecurity insurance. And we talked for about 10 minutes about this, but you gotta, number one, make sure you're meeting the requirements, make sure you have, sometimes even a lawyer review it and make sure it's there. And then lastly, tell your IT team or your security team, hey, we signed up as insurance, so they'll know what they signed up for. So in case of a breach, you can say, yes, we did have multi-factor, we did have patching, we did have security awareness training, et cetera, et cetera. Then you can potentially still get paid after that breach happens. Okay, number 9, conduct ongoing security assessments and remediation. And I'm saying this as a person that I've run security assessments, pen test teams for over 20 years. And I'll give you a quick scenario. I would do the security assessment, pen test, give them the results, and then they would have to go back and do retesting and fix everything. We'd come back, retest about a month later, a whole new host of vulnerabilities have come up, okay? And then, by then that pen test we did that you spent, $10,000, $30,000, $50,000 on is obsolete. Literally the next day your environment changes, new vulnerabilities came out. So it is assessing and remediation. It's like when you get out of your car every single day, you close and lock your door every single time. You're not going to say, I'm going to close and lock my door once a month. It has to happen.
And these changes happen every day when you move to the cloud, by the way.
Every day. And so that's why at Cyvatar, your pen test is free. We're continually scanning, patching, fixing you. Your pen test is free, right? Because that's just not something we should be charging for because it's going to be obsolete, like you said, Carlos.
Yep. This goes from the idea that hackers assume you're compliant.
Yes, exactly. The thing about it, hackers are hacking you every single second. You see on the internet, look at your logs. Someone's trying to hack into you every single second, but you're only patching once a month. You're only remediating, every so often. It has to be continued. Number 10, implement governance and management support. I'll let you talk about this, Carlos. Like, why is this important?
Well, yeah. So think about who is involved in your cybersecurity program at the law firm. The law firms I work with, I meet at least monthly with the COO and a technology partner or a partner who, is on top of these things. Otherwise, you're going to run into the issue of having policies that nobody knows, not having people attend training, and not knowing what frameworks you need to follow or want to follow, what your contractual requirements are with your clients. So it is very important that your partners and your CEO or COO, Chief Administrator Officer, however you call it at your law firm, are engaged in the conversation. You need to be engaged with the general counsel, whether it's internal or external. Understand that. Help them understand what you're doing and why. So without it, you're not going to have a program.
Thank you, Carlos. That's the top 10. We will have this as a download. Oh, yeah, we have a bonus. We'll have a download. You can download these top 10s with the explanations that we gave for follow-up. Secure your remote workforce. Just to explain this, it used to be you had your internal network and your external network, and you were a cookie, right? Hard, crunchy shell, soft inside, right? Well, now you got your cloud network and you got your remote network. And so you got less resources securing a bigger attack surface. And most employees of law firms now, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, they're working remote. At least half of them are working remote. So what was the new plan that these law firms have to secure their remote workforce, if any? So you gotta have
so they still rely on VPN, and which is again going to be difficult for you to provide that consistent experience wherever they are. So all of these 10 controls, probably 7 are technical, come into this one item, and that zero trust network architecture to provide that transparency and consistent user experience. So
You move from being a cookie to being tapioca pudding.
Let's jump into some questions here. I see a few coming up in the chat there. Court, you want to read off the first question you have there?
Who from the management team and partnership should be involved in the overall management of cybersecurity risk?
Yeah,
All right,
I think I touched on that at the end, but when I engaged as a fractional CISO with a client a year or so ago, I asked, I need to speak and meet with your COO, your CFO, and your GC. And this is a 400 lawyers law firm. I was flat out told no, and why, and no, and why for like 3 months that I asked. And it was very conflictive. Long story short, after a period of time, that CIO was no longer there. And when I finally got to sit with the COO and the general counsel, they were like, "Yeah, of course we wanted to talk to you. We didn't know what's going on." And at that point, their perception of the cybersecurity was different because at that point it was what we call in the industry security by obscurity. Management didn't know what was going on.
Yep.
And when I finally got to sit with them and tell them what we're doing, why we will be following NIST and all of this, they were very appreciative and got engaged. We started meeting once a month. I supported them through the whole cyber insurance process, and they wanted to be engaged. Like Mark mentioned, they know it's important. They want to do it. They can't do it if they don't know what they need to do, and that's where they need you. They need us to educate them. So
And,
I would
the
say
question is,
GC, COO, and GC and COO and a partner for sure.
the question is this a legal risk problem, a financial risk problem, or a technology problem? And the short answer is yes, it's all of those. So really, you need to have somebody who owns it, but somebody who coordinates it with all the other components.
Okay, next question, Court.
What should law firms be looking for in digital forensics DFIR companies?
Well, the first is whether they're on the panel for their insurer, and the second one is how comprehensive are their solutions that they offer, how skilled are the people that they work, and how responsive are they to your needs.
And I will add to that a couple of things. One that Corey mentioned, and one that I will add. When you're looking for an MSSP, have your requirements list that you can evaluate against. You have no idea how many law firms I talk to where they tell me, help me find a MSSP, and say, okay, what do you want? And they don't know. They just said, well, I don't know, whatever they do. So I have this, because of this, I developed this tool where we evaluate, got a number of questions and evaluate different aspects of what we're looking for. But if you don't have the requirements, you're going to get what you're going to get. Right, you're gonna get what you pay for. That's one thing. The second thing is, and Mark mentioned, Corey mentioned this, and we've been saying today, is the alarm tossing, the alert tossing is no longer enough. You have to find partners that can help you mitigate, whether it's with your retainer, incident response, or with your MSSP, bringing them both together. Find someone that can help you with hands on the keyboard, do the work.
Incident response isn't enough. You have to prevent it first. Incident response is your fallback.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%. I think that's where the industry has been challenged. We're turning into big pharma. There's a lot of money being made off of incident response, and breach lawyers know that, right? And, insurance companies, they bring in their own, forensic investigators, but if they find out you didn't meet the requirements that the underwriters set you up with, they're like, looks like you didn't have multi-factor here. You said you did. Okay, we might not pay you. So let's squeeze in one more question here.
What should law firms be looking for in outsourced cybersecurity companies?
Yeah, I think I alluded to that earlier. Have your requirements, but really look for folks that can help you with hands-on, not gonna make this a self-pitch or anything. I don't mean that, but Cyvatar is one that works with some of my clients, and they can actually mitigate the issue, the ransomware, the virus, whatever. They can isolate the machine. They can do different things to contain, right? And then that way we have more time to react and respond.
Technology neutral, skilled, business oriented, just really knowledgeable. That's the important things.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I'll just finish with the approach we built here at Cyvatar is, prevention, detection, and response. So I've been on the incident response side of the house. It's a ton of work to clean up after an incident, but it's not that hard if you actually keep the house clean all along, right? Make sure multi-factors are in place, make sure you're logging, monitoring, and looking at all the proper activities, applying patches, email phishing, DNS security, building a comprehensive program is not that hard to prevent these attacks because hackers, they're looking for the low-hanging fruit. And they're just literally scanning the internet. They'll see who clicks on the link. And whoever clicks on it and falls for it, that's the next victim in most cases. So that is the challenge that we have to solve. Like, I don't want to be low-hanging fruit. I just want to make sure I can run faster than you, Mark and Carlos.
That's right. The trick to being a successful law firm is to get them to attack another law firm.
Yes, exactly. Okay, that being said, I just want to be conscious of time. We are done. Thank you all for attending. And again, you'll see many more of these coming from us at Cyvatar because what we have realized, especially in 2024, there's a lot of education that has to happen. So we're just going to keep educating the market so that they better understand how they can secure themselves. So thank you.